Good day, fellow South Africans and citizens of the world.
I've been looking around for salvation. I've been looking around for the truth. All around me I see frustration, and I looked all over till I found you. I sit and listen to your stories, and you're telling me, please don't worry. A lot in this world you should know, and love in life is where you should go. If you're looking for somewhere to go, if you're looking for someone to know, if you're looking for someone to guide you, then love in life will guide you. I know that life outside is so hard. There's a lot of things that can tear you apart. I know the road sometimes feel lonely, but remember you're not the one and only. There's always someone there to help you, a helping hand to pull you through. There's only one thing you should do: take my hand and join the Love and Laugh crew. If you're looking for somewhere to go, if you're looking for someone to know, if you're looking for someone to guide you, then let love and life guide you.
Koinant! Good evening, fellow South Africans and citizens of the world. And yes, it's going to be a cracker tonight, that's for sure. But before we start tonight's live stream, some admin and a painting. Tonight we will be auctioning an original painting by Bonnie Hutt, granddaughter of the Galloping Granny, Mavis Hutchinson. The line painting is 20 centimeters by 30 centimeters. Let me show you the original painting. Here we are. Absolute beauty. Look at those eyes. Absolutely stunning. Now, anyone viewing this live stream can participate in the auction. The lion painting makes up part of the composite image behind me. There, you can see it right there. It's on all my videos. It previously sold 2 weeks ago on auction for 20,000 Rand, with the funds going to support Farmers Aid South Africa, who deliver food packages to starving whites across South Africa. After paying for the painting, the generous winner contacted me and asked if I would resell it again to help Farmers Aid. To bid on the painting, simply use a side chat with the title "A Lion Painting," then Rand, and then your bid, which can be any amount above the current lowest bid, which is 1,000 Rand. This is an auction, so the highest bid wins. During the live stream, I will display the painting from time to time. The highest bid near the end of the live stream will need to contact me if they are not known to us by email to confirm their bid. All proceeds go to the charity Farmers Aid. Now, talking about Farmers Aid, I have to tell you that about 11,000 food parcels containing maize meal, loaves and bread, food hampers, soap, sanitizers and masks were distributed to residents of the Ittering informal settlement near Laudium in Pretoria on Wednesday. Let's have a look at that. This is how desperate things are getting in South Africa. It's quite an extraordinary video. Well, I think that footage tells the story. It's very sad. Starvation and food hampers is one of the subjects we'll be discussing tonight, including the court's ruling today that NPOs can deliver food to their own communities. Now with that, let me introduce our guest, Gareth Cliff. Give me a second while I get him on. Good evening, Gareth. How are you?
I'm good, Scott. How are you?
Excellent, thank you. Excellent. And welcome to tonight's Loving Life live stream.
Thank you very much. My sound is good enough for you? You happy?
Yeah, the sound is perfect. Now, well, you've been on the radio for a long time, so I guess it always will be perfect.
I should hope so. After all this time, if I can't get that right, then I shouldn't really have a job in radio, should I?
Well, you got it right. Now, please tell us about how you started Cliff Central, how it came about, and where you want to take it in the future. I've actually got a link to Cliff Central down below this video.
Thank you very much. We've been in business for 6 years. I started cliffcentral.com as a podcast and a streaming platform to give people another option. So that they wouldn't have to just listen to terrestrial radio in South Africa, which is increasingly becoming dreadfully boring and or ideologically awful. And it was also for me not only a place where I could have my say and where we could gather a bunch of other talented people and let them have their say, but it was also a place where the audience could decide how a channel of the future might look. And it's been very exciting. We've spent these 6 years really building a very, very cool business. We were looking at having our best year ever until coronavirus came along, and now suddenly, it feels like we're back in startup mode, and we have to go back to basics. And essentially, we have to start again with the business of what we're doing, because all of our clients have been affected very badly, even though we haven't really had to change very much about the way we do things.
Right. Now, you also used to work for Radio 702, didn't you, way back then?
Yeah, that 702 was the first real job I had after university. And I was the morning show host after John Burks when he left, and then before John Robbie took over.
Well, I have to tell you, Long John Burks was an iconic broadcaster. I remember his crank calls. He once called up Gary Player. And he said,
yeah,
Gary, right. Gary, this is Labeskachni here, and you made up some from Dear Doringstad or something like that, and said, we would love to have you come over. We're going to make little jelly molds of you. Do you remember that one?
I used to listen to John on my way into school as a kid, and I had the great fortune of meeting him after I'd been fired on campus radio. He was the only guy in radio in South Africa I've ever really looked up to. And I said to him, I'd like to meet you. I sent him a letter, and he said, you can come in. I'm actually doing my last show. And he was finishing up his last show, and he said to me, I am leaving, so I can't do very much for you, but I'm going to introduce you to someone called Rena Bromberg, who he did. And Rena and I remain business partners to this day.
Fantastic. Now, this day, we're talking about this day. I think there are a few really big questions we need to ask ourselves, and I'd like to put these to you. The first is,
yes.
Were the shoes the ANC government stepped into in 1994 simply too big for them, or do the members of parliament have absolutely no clue to what a democracy really is?
Well, this is a story that's been repeated so many times in Africa, where liberation movements are forced to become governments, and it's not their tour de force. It's not something that they're actually particularly well suited to achieve. First of all, the people who were well suited to governing were the ones who were trained overseas, and they never got along with the ones who were imprisoned here. They were out of touch with the people very often, and that crowd, who were largely the UDF and Thabo Mbeki crowd post 1994, did a pretty good job of governing for a time. They also understood the principles of at least constitutional democracy in a sense that it was slightly different to the ones that the Western world holds up as good examples. But they were much better than what came after, which was a much more coarse, rabid African nationalism, which I think forced South Africa to grapple with hitherto unbelievable levels of corruption and ideological backtracking. And really, the ANC have been their own worst enemies. But do I think that they filled shoes that were too big for them? No, I think that they're actually a very good protege of the old Nationalist Party in some ways, because they've inherited their very worst characteristics and none of their efficiencies.
Right. Now, don't you think they're kind of hog-tied having a tie-up with the South African Communist Party and COSATU?
Absolutely, but that's the bed they made to lie in, and now they've got to go and sleep in it every night, and they really are betwixt and between. They're being pulled in one direction by the trade unions. COSATU is really a dismembered shadow of its former self. So COSATU really, at this point, is a very loose aggregation of mostly people who work in government departments, in the bureaucracy. The mine workers have largely left COSATU for other unions, and many of the most important unions that the ANC used to rely on are defunct now. They're really just there to make sure that people who are already in the employ of the state keep receiving their increases. They have no other goal to speak of, and they involve themselves in politics, which is none of their business. As for the Communist Party, that's a really rotten organization of some of the most low-level thinkers that South Africa has ever had. I mean, gone are the days where you had real dyed-in-the-wool commies like Joe Slovo. Now what we've got is this. It's a lickspittle, second-grade, low-rate, low-rent version with people like Bladen Zimande, and really a Jeremy Cronin, I think, is still hanging around there for God knows what reason. But it's essentially just the most basic people that really couldn't find work anywhere else. Any respectable people left the trade union some time ago for very cushy jobs in the private sector, and or in consulting jobs, and some of them even overseas. They left South Africa for greener pastures, having realized that communism had turned out to be a pretty bad bet for their own personal happiness, and would turn out so for the country as well.
Right. Well, when you have the Minister of Basic Education who can't actually recite a number, rather like Jacob Zuma infamously a few years back, it kind of tells you the level of person who's in that ministerial position. But I think one of the major...
Well, we're the only country. I think we're the only country in the world that calls that department basic education.
Yeah.
I think we're the only people. Maybe you and I are the only two who find that irony is almost too much to bear, because that's precisely what they do give children, is a very basic education. Those children end up coming out in the most basic of fashions and not being particularly useful in the economy. I wrote a letter 10 years ago when I first started writing these blogs, which circulated widely then, to then President Jacob Zuma, saying the problem with our youth isn't that they're unemployed, it's that they're unemployable. And the education department has done absolutely nothing to remedy that problem.
Right. Well, I have to tell you, your letter you wrote to the president about a week ago really got them jumping on hot coals. I loved it. And part of the issue, obviously, is the corruption. When do you think the justice system in South Africa will pull a corrupt ANC heavyweight before the courts? Because that is a huge issue right now.
I think there are only two ways that'll happen. Number one, if the ANC itself offers up some sacrifices, which is unlikely, but there's a slim chance that someone like Jacob Zuma could spill the beans. There's perhaps the possibility, the distant possibility, that other people, sick of seeing the ANC and their previously quite good reputation being dashed against the rocks by corruption and nepotism and ugliness of every kind, a direct contradiction of their founding charters, that someone will eventually just sell a bunch of the crooks down the river. Or the other option, the only other way that it'll happen, is if there's significant and ongoing public pressure, which ultimately could cost them a province, another 2 cities. I mean, maybe then they'll start to wake up to this, but I don't think it's impossible. I'm just not holding my breath. I have come to realize that exercising the soft bigotry of low expectations against the ANC means I'll never be disappointed.
I guess that's a good way to put it. Now, what we're actually doing tonight, Gareth, is we're actually selling a painting. So from time to time, I'm going to put that painting up. The painting, the proceeds from the painting are going to a charity which delivers food to starving white people. So we're hoping that painting will pick up a good price. I'm just going to address the side chat and the viewers right now, so give me a second. Okay, I'll just
go ahead.
Get that out of the way. Okay, for everybody watching right now, and let's just see how many people we have following us right now. We've got about 200 people watching right now. 224. What I've got on the screen is the lion painting that's been sold tonight. Now, it previously sold for 20,000 Rand, and the winner, who paid the money to Farmers Aid, said, please resell it, so we are. So this is a fabulous painting. Please put in your bid into the side chat. Just say a lion painting and the amount that you're willing to bid for it. We've got a bid for 3,500 Rand just come through from Mel. Thank you, Mel. So I'll just keep that up there, and at the end of the live stream, the highest bid wins this painting. All right, let's get right back to Gareth. Here we go. Okay. Sorry, Gareth. Just a bit of admin here.
No, not at all. No, it's good. It's good. Absolutely.
Right. Now, let's continue. Yeah. Dlamini Zuma. What do you think would happen if she becomes the president of South Africa?
Well, we may still find out, and it's not a welcome idea. I don't think it's something that anybody's relishing. She seems to be flexing her muscle, but it's within her specific duty as Minister of Cooperative Governance in the case of a state of emergency or a state of what have they called it? State of alertness or whatever we're in at the moment with this lockdown. So she has extraordinary responsibilities. I mean, we've been paying for her for the last year and a half to really just sit around and do absolutely nothing. So I'm almost relieved that she's found some meaningful employment in government for the first time, and along with her, some of the other ministers who, for the first time in their lives, some of them are actually being tested in government. They're being asked to host press conferences and come up with new and stupid regulations every day. I mean, we should be grateful for small mercies that these people are actually working for their salaries for a change. Usually, they're just wasting taxpayers' money on travel and meetings that we never seem to get any important decisions from. So in some ways, I'm glad about that. I don't know that she's this tyrannical, dangerous, strategic genius. I think she's a bumbling fool like so many others in the ANC.
Right. Now, I've just been corrected by the side chat. We've got about 1,000 people watching us, so let's put the record straight there. Now, talking about Dlamini Zuma, I don't know if you can watch the live stream while we're actually talking, but I'm going to put up an image for the side chat, and I'll tell you what it is. It's from an article which says, "Up in smoke, Dlamini Zuma's illegal cigarette connection resurfaces." And there's a picture of Dlamini Zuma below it.
Oh, yeah.
Now, do you want to talk about that? Because I think this is a hugely controversial issue.
Well, yeah, I think this is more an issue for the investigative journalists, because I've seen substantial information that indicates that it's not actually her that's involved in this, and some of the illicit tobacco organized crime syndicates have actually they've come out and denied that they're involved with her in any way, which is not something that they needed to do. So it's a bizarre thing that's happened there. I don't know that it's, a lot of people saying it's her son. Edward Zuma is the son of Jacob Zuma with another woman. And she does have children with him, but as far as I know, none of them are involved in the illicit tobacco trade. So it's really conjecture, and I'm careful that the ANC has enough stupid and dangerous things going on without us having to make any up. This one doesn't seem to me to have yet enough evidence that it's true. So I'd rather err on the side of caution and say perhaps this is the one thing that we can't point a finger at her for.
If it's not that, do you think it's perhaps a power play? Because remember, Ramaphosa came out and said you will be able to buy cigarettes from the 1st of May. And then a few days later, the NCC under her said, no, you're not going to let that happen. Do you think this is her flexing her muscles and saying, hey, I'm actually in charge here?
Well, it might be. I don't know, because they won't release the minutes of any of these meetings. These are the executive checking on the executive, which is about as reliable as leaving a dangerous carnivore in charge of the rabbit pen. I don't know what's going on in those meetings. It would be speculation on my part to imagine what's actually happened. But what we do know for sure is that if you judge the ANC by what they do and not what they say, they're not coming at this with any grand plan. And if it is a power grab, it's purely opportunism. It's like someone walking past a house where the door's wide open and then stealing the TV. That's more the ANC's way of operating than to have some great plan for how they're going to break into the house and get the TV. These things either fall into their lap or they miss it completely. I mean, they've just managed absolutely not a thing in the last 10 years properly. Not a single thing. This government is incompetent at even corruption.
And if you look at the municipal level, what's happened there is self-evident.
Well, yes, but we've got an interesting thing that's happened at the municipal level, and it's something that makes everyone in government very uncomfortable. About 93% of our municipalities are insolvent. What that means is that people in 93% of the municipalities in South Africa already know what anarchy feels like. In other words, they have no interaction on a daily, weekly, monthly, perhaps even annual basis with the government. That should frighten government a lot more than election results or the coronavirus or even this lockdown and the building resentment and anger towards them on the political level. The reason for that is because those people who are not involved with their municipalities at all, and those municipalities which have run out of money and are not going to be bailed out anymore because there's no more money left to steal, those people already have given up on government. They have no reason, no interest, and no capacity to stand up and deal with the ANC or anyone else at this stage. So they already don't matter. And we were on such a good trajectory of making government less and less important in our lives until this bloody virus came along, and it put them front and center again and gave them the opportunity to make regulations and to involve themselves in ordinary South Africans' lives. You know, only 12 million people out of a population of 60-odd million went to vote for the ANC. 12 million people. Yeah. It's a minority of the country's population.
Right. Now, let me ask you, you mentioned the lockdown. My view is that this lockdown is a complete waste of time because, you know, what they're doing is they're trying to copy the strategy of a first world country like, let's say, Australia, the US, or countries like around Europe, where you can have social distancing at home. In South Africa, in the townships, it's impossible to have social distancing. And then when you allow people to get on taxis, that's a petri dish for the coronavirus. So, you know, it's like, why bother? And then you see all these videos coming out in the African townships where they're milling around today, yesterday, the day before.
Yeah, you're not wrong. You're not wrong, but I think that all the other governments you've just mentioned are as stupid as the South African government, because what's emerging from this mess is that everyone used bad expertise and bad models to predict what was going to happen. The lockdowns invariably all over the world were a complete waste of time. Everywhere. In countries like Sweden and in states of the United States like Florida and Texas, where they just kept the economy going, there was no lockdown, no shutdown of any kind. The same number of people or less as if there had been a lockdown have died, because obviously COVID will get you if COVID's going to get you.
Exactly.
And what we've learned is that the Australian government, the New Zealand government, the French, the British, and everybody else in the world who's decided that the lockdown was the right strategy are all equally bloody stupid, and so are the South African government. So all of these countries took their lead from China, which is not a great place to take anything from, because China, as we know, are also reprehensible and morally, in some way, guilty of launching this thing, or at very least not telling the truth about its origins, and then giving us false information in the first couple of months, which may have saved many more lives. So I wouldn't take China's advice on anything in this respect. We've been lied to by China. We've been lied to by our own governments in most countries in the world. We've been lied to by the media, who've made this thing a hysterical ratings grab, churning out alarmism around the clock. We've been lied to by experts and people like this Neil Ferguson at Imperial College in London, whose research was the main catalyst for all of the madness that's followed. Himself couldn't even keep to lockdown rules and had to go and visit his married girlfriend for sexual relations. And it turns out he used models that were completely erroneous and have plunged most of the world into a depression.
Absolutely.
Now, I think all four of those groups I've just mentioned need to be held responsible, individually and severally. The Chinese, the governments that made the lockdown decisions, the experts who advised the governments to make the lockdown decisions, and the media. All four groups need to be paying a very big price for the fact that they've ruined small businesses across the board. They've ruined people's livelihoods. They've taken money out of the economy. They've forced the whole world into a hole. And I think there needs to be some payback.
Well, I have an observation, and that is that Donald Trump is not happy about the lockdown in the US. And yet it seems like there's a higher force that is forcing him to abide by having that lockdown. What are your views on that?
Well, Donald Trump is enigmatic because he's not a politician, and yet he's doing a better political job than most of the politicians are. And I think that's very embarrassing for career politicians. It's also embarrassing for the Democrats, who still haven't given America a better option, right?
Right.
So I think Donald Trump he breaks all the rules. He doesn't fit into any of the molds that we've had before for a politician. And for that reason, he's received some treatment that most politicians have never had to deal with. Having said that, he does have the most unbelievably he's got a revolting personality, and he's self-absorbed to a degree that's probably very unhealthy. He has extraordinary narcissism and egoism in him, but I suppose those are the characteristics that propel someone to the position of president of the most important country in the world. They're also the same things that propelled him to the top of the business world for some time, certainly the New York real estate world. So I think Donald Trump is interesting. He doesn't always say the right thing. He certainly doesn't say it nicely. But he's made as many mistakes as anyone else in American politics, and probably a fewer, in fact. Certainly he has delivered a lot more than any of his predecessors in the same amount of time, and I think that is praiseworthy.
Yeah,
you judge him by his actions, not by what he's saying.
I totally agree, and you've got to recognize that when the fake news, the mainstream media, attacks someone, they're doing something right, because they're going against their narrative.
Well, I think that's the case all over the world, is that the media have become, they present themselves as being objective, but of course they're ideologically biased, and usually only on one side. And they don't like anyone going counter to their narrative. It certainly happened in South Africa, it's happening in America as we speak, and it's interesting to watch. I mean, I'm finding it very entertaining because I don't live in America, so it's not my problem. It must be how you feel, for example, watching South Africa's situation sometimes. It must be entertaining to you, even though it must worry you on some level too. So I think that's how I feel about Donald Trump in America. It certainly is a topic of much debate and discussion around the world, and you do meet people who absolutely hate him. You meet people who absolutely love him, and virtually no one in between.
Right. Now, I just want to address the people watching the video right now. Remember the painting? You can see it on the screen beside Gareth. The current bid, I think, is about 3,500 rand. Please feel free to put your bid in the side chat. If we don't know you, we'll need an email confirmation. The painting will be sold tonight, and it's a beautiful painting by Bonnie Hutt. Now, okay, let's get back to the situation here. Now, I'd like to discuss something that's really topical right now, Gareth. And if you cast your mind back to January 2016, you won a court case to be reinstated as a judge on the television music competition show Idols South Africa on Mnet after being suspended for posting an allegedly racist remark on Twitter. What do you think about Bianca Shumbi, a contestant for Miss South Africa, who has just been forced to withdraw as a participant in the competition after some of her racist tweets posted 6 years ago when she was 14 went viral? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, let me just add a little bit of story to your introduction there as to what I was doing in it was actually, it was 2016. I had posted a comment about Mmusi Maimane, the leader of the DA's tweet regarding freedom of speech. And my tweet read as follows, and you can read this any way you like. I don't know how you get to racism. I said, people really don't understand freedom of speech. And the reason it was in this context of race is because I suspect that Bell Pottinger were already involved at that point, and they were fomenting a lot of division and divisiveness in South African society, which I thought was we didn't know it was going on until much further down the line, when we discovered the Gupta and the Zuma link and the fact that this was part of a plan. But at that stage, it was all about a real estate agent in KwaZulu-Natal called Penny Sparrow, who had tweeted something egregious and disgusting about black people on the beach, which was completely out of order. And the whole of South Africa, quite rightly, was incensed. I think that's become a pastime, by the way, for lots of people to be incensed on social media. But at that stage, it seemed like a legitimate uproar. And people were saying, should we ban certain kinds of speech, which was what Mmusi Maimane of the DA said. And that was where I quoted him in this poll that he asked, where 70% of people said, yes, we should ban certain kinds of speech. And I said, people don't understand freedom of speech. Anyway, it was taken to mean that I was supporting horrible speech, racist speech,
Right.
hate speech, which of course I wasn't. So we went to court, and I won on the basis of the fact that we had a contract with Mnet. They had to put their tail between their legs and put me back on the show. I went back and then did that season and resigned anyway. But the fact is that you sometimes have to fight these things, especially if you do believe that you've been wronged, which is what I believed at the time. You can't let people call you things that you are not. And I'm most certainly not a racist. And I was very proud of winning that victory in court. I was proud of my advocate, who was Dali Mpofu, who's the chairperson of the EFF. He represented me beautifully. And if you were a white racist, you wouldn't employ the chairperson of the EFF to represent you. So I was also making a point there. But if you fast forward to what we're dealing with now, I only very tangentially know about the story because I'm not on Twitter very much anymore. So I don't know the detail of it, but I have seen what this girl is supposed to have said, I think at the age of like 13 or 14.
Exactly, yeah.
I don't know whether we aren't creating a rod for our own backs. The people who are upset, because what she may have said, and I've only just seen a little bit of this, I haven't been paying attention to it. What she said may be revolting and terrible, but she said it at 13 or 14, and I think if we're all going to be held responsible for things that children say and do, we're going down a path where we can never have redemption for any human being, because everyone says something stupid or something horrible at some point. I mean, families say things to each other. Mothers and fathers have fights in front of the children. People who've been in love for years say terrible things to each other that they regret immediately after.
Right.
And I do think we need some path to redemption. Having said that, I don't think it's very clever of anyone to be tweeting anything stupid or nasty or racist or bigoted or sexist or homophobic or anything like that. And for children to blissfully enter into the world of social media without any training, teaching, orientation is to put themselves in harm's way. I don't think it's terribly important that you run for Miss South Africa. So I don't think that this is going to necessarily ruin the girl's life from that point of view. What it will do is ruin her reputation. And I think that's unfair. I think we should all leave a little corner of our hearts, no matter how angry we are, for a young person to find redemption and to be able to improve by learning new things and to change bad ideas into good. But I certainly can't condone what she is supposed to have said, because I think it's a silly thing to have done. And maybe you have to pay a price for silly things, even if you're a young person.
Right. Well, I actually want to raise very briefly the situation with Vicky Momberg. Okay, when she used the K word X number of times, when she was under extreme stress and, she'd just been mugged. And the ridiculous situation where they put a 2-year behind bar sentence on her. And I have some news directly from Vicky. I speak to Vicky from time to time, and she phoned me earlier this week.
I hope she's not as rude to you as she is to everyone else, by the looks of things.
Well, look, I think that she's got some issues, but I think that she's really absolutely emotionally traumatized, and I think that we've got to understand, and I can understand why she would be. And the news is that the court has refused to accept her case where she's trying to get compensation. They've actually rejected it. And I've actually said to her, look, Vicky, I'd love to have you. She needs to get Skype put on her computer. I said, look, I'd love to have a chat to you about that off air, so it'd just be a recorded conversation to give her side of the story, because I think it needs to be aired. And yes, she does have issues. I accept that. But, again, I like with Bianca Scumbi, I mean, you got to understand that the emotional stress Vicky has gone through over the last couple of years has been mind-blowing. You've got to feel sorry for
Yes,
her over that.
but with all the love in the world, I think there's a part of that is her fault.
I agree.
You know, you've got to keep yourself
agree.
calm. I was stopped by the police speeding in a case that became very widely circulated. It was live on television, effectively. I mean, they were recording. They were behind me with cameras. I was driving home after a day's filming in Durban and landed back at home, and I was going too fast on the R21 on the way home. And the police, unbeknown to me, had a camera crew, a news crew with them. They didn't know it was going to be me. They really just lucked out and pulled me over. But I had the good sense before I even saw the cameras to not antagonize or abuse these police people who were doing their work.
Right.
As much as we are all required to do the best we can in an emotional situation, these days there are cameras everywhere. If you behave badly, someone's going to film it, and it's going to look very bad for you. And it can compound your problems rather than make them easier. I'm very proud of the fact that I was polite to the police, that I, cooperated with them completely. And while the ultimate conclusion of this is a much happier one than Vicky Momberg's, and I'm certainly not comparing us, I don't know her at all. All I saw was what everyone else in the world must have seen, is this very abusive, very angry person who clearly does have problems. And I'm not going to blame her for those problems, but I do think that you've got to behave in a certain way if you expect people to treat you a certain way. And I'm not going to get involved in that because Vicky Momberg is not my problem. And I don't believe that everything is about race. In this case, I don't think that white people who behave badly are any better than the people on Black Twitter who are racially abusing white people. I think it's all just very unfortunate, and I think we can do better than that.
Well, just talking about that, I see Muzi Nkosi is in the side chat here, and he said that if the opportunity presented itself, he would love to join this conversation. Now, if you don't have an issue with that, Gareth, I'd love to get Muzi on. He's a very, very smart African fellow. He's been on my live stream a few times. He's very knowledgeable, and he's someone you might find actually quite useful to talk to later if you feel so inspired, because he is without work, and he's also one of the victims of the ANC. And he's a really nice fellow. So if you don't have a problem, we got 4,500 rand for the painting at this stage. Now, guys, when do you have a problem with Muzi joining us, Gareth?
No, not at all. It's your show. You can do as you like.
All right, Muzi, just to let you know, we'll be joining you to the show in a couple of minutes. Before we do.
Can you tell me what's happening in Australia? I'm afraid I don't pay very much attention. What's going on there that's interesting?
Okay, well, what's interesting is that the lockdown has actually worked. The curve is completely flattened. In the state of Queensland, where I am, we have about 2 active cases in the whole of the state, and they haven't had any positive tests for several days now, so they're actually now loosening the ties, although the borders to other states are still shut off because Victoria and New South Wales have a higher degree of infections. So, it's kind of state by state depending on how it's going with the actual COVID-19. Apart from that, that's really been the big news. I can tell you that yesterday I just walked around the shopping centre, and it was like everything has gone back to normal. The hairdressers are open, everything is back and running again. So it's worked. Whereas if you look at South Africa...
That's very good news.
Yeah, but if you look at South Africa, because of the situation in the townships, it's a parabolic curve going up on the graph, which is very, very frightening.
Well, no, because the latest statistics still show that our death rates more or less as it was, in the middle of lockdown and at the beginning of lockdown. So as I understand it, we're not necessarily performing worse. What's happened, though, is the economic costs are ratcheting up.
Well,
so
I
think the disease is a sideshow, frankly.
Well, the NMSRA has actually stopped taking the death figures because the home affairs are shut, and they're saying the figures are ridiculous. They've actually stopped recording those figures. If you go and check their website, they say there, because Home Affairs are not recording all the deaths, because the deaths have actually dropped off.
But I don't think it's the responsibility of Home Affairs, with due respect. I think it's every bit of information is funneled to us through this National Coronavirus Command Council, and there are various sites where you can track the numbers as people are being tested. And in the Western Cape, for example, they're testing more people than in any other province in the country. And
it's still not enough.
Even though those numbers are high, they're nowhere. They don't compare nearly to places like Italy and Spain at this point. And remember, we're only a little bit behind them on the general curve. In fact, that's my whole point, is that the lockdown, it seems, was unnecessary. And if it was necessary, it was only necessary for the 3 weeks that we were promised it would last at the very beginning.
Right. Well, all I can do is direct you to the NMRSA's website, and you will see that they've stopped recording death figures because they say they're inaccurate. That's actually on their website, if you want to check that out. Now, what I might do at this point is get Muzi on to come and join us, because
cool, absolutely.
Okay, let me just get Muzi. I hope you're ready, Muzi. Here we go. Okay, Muzi's joining us. Hi, Muzi. Hi, Muzi. Can you hear me?
Hi.
Meet Gareth.
Yes, I can.
Gareth, meet Muzi and Causey.
How are you? I'm
good, and you, Gareth? How are you?
Very, very good. Thank you. Excellent, excellent. What's up?
Muzi, would you like to introduce yourself to Gareth?
Yes. First of all, Gareth, I used to listen to you almost every day on my way to school in high school, so I'm very familiar with the type of person you are.
Thank you.
And I do indeed like the type of person you are, very outspoken and so on. I'm just your average South African who has a graphic design degree. I graduated last year, but I am unemployed and I am not benefiting from any of the BEE, initiatives that our government has implemented. I, in fact, am like an outcast to the rest of the BE and other Black privileged people, just because I sound different, just because I act different, just because I believe different. So I'm a victim as well. We're all South Africans, and the government just wants to help people of their own circle. So that's my story.
Well, welcome to the club. The nice thing about what you've just outlined is that is the case for, I think, very many South Africans of different races, different ages, different backgrounds, and the entire idea of privilege, which I think you framed quite well, seems to be that the only real elite in South Africa is the people who are connected to the most powerful politicians in the ANC. Everybody else has to fend for themselves. So you have my sympathies, Muzi, and as a graphic design student, I'm sure that you're a creative guy. It must be very frustrating to be stuck without meaningful employment. But I know it doesn't help to say this. Sadly, you're going to be one of even more of our compatriots who are left out in the cold after this lockdown has finally broken. So I'm afraid all I can say to you is, in Afrikaans they'd say vasbyt, and keep trying, because if you're good, there will eventually be something that you can do. And I'm absolutely sure that thinking differently, which is, I think, the main area of difference between you and the ANC, or certainly the powerful politicians at the top of it, thinking differently is a superpower. It's not something to make you a victim. It's something that actually makes you an individual, a worthy one at that. And we must never forget that every voice counts, yours, mine, and they all count the same, Muzi. So be strong.
Muzi? Oh, your sound's not on, Muzi.
Oh.
That's better.
Can you hear me now?
There we are. I can hear you now, yeah.
No, your sound's off again. Muzi, your sound's off again. We've lost your sound. Okay, just while Muzi's fixing that, Gareth, let's turn our attention on the president, Ramaphosa.
Yes.
Do you think he's got any credibility left?
Look, Cyril Ramaphosa was the guy who helped to draft the Constitution with Rolf Meyer, and he was a hard-working man who came from a union background. He's not an idiot. He was a beneficiary of some of the first big BEE deals, and there are very few people in South Africa who have an ugly story of Cyril. You know, he's not the kind of guy who's gone around and made enemies. He was sidelined by Thabo Mbeki and other people in the ANC when the Mandela administration came to an end, because he was really Thabo's rival in some ways. And I have met the president once or twice, and I've always found him to be a charming, sophisticated man who is congenial and generous with compliments and his company. He seems like a very convivial chap. Having said all of that, I think that he's inherited a poison chalice, but he was part of the poison in the chalice as it was inherited. I mean, he was there sitting at the table while Jacob Zuma was doing all the things that he was doing. And it seems very odd to me that there are people in this country who don't see the continuity of the ANC story. They see it in personality cult, like, you know, Jacob Zuma bad and Cyril Ramaphosa good. And I don't think either of those things are completely true. Just as you can't say Nelson Mandela was 100% saintly. There were things about Mandela that made him very difficult to deal with, both for people inside the ANC and outside. But I don't think Cyril's lost all his credibility. I think people are very, very angry at the moment because we've been put in a situation where people like Muzi and I and others in South Africa who've been trying to run businesses in an economy that really is not performing very well because of the ANC and its policies. I think he's presiding over a situation which is not making him any new friends. And while he showed leadership in the beginning and appealed to South Africans across the board, and we answered his call and said, yes, Mr. President, we understand, we'll go into lockdown, that goodwill is starting to wear thin. And he's losing the moral high ground of caring about lives and looking after people to putting people in the way of harm by threatening their livelihoods. So would I want his job? Absolutely not. Do I think he's lost all credibility? No, but he's very close to it. Is there something better waiting in the wings? Absolutely not.
Okay, but
does that answer your question?
Sort of, but why does he talk about after COVID-19 he's going to step up black economic transformation? Isn't that the worst possible thing you can do, to impose that on top of a faltering economy?
Yes, but Scott, you haven't been reading the last 24 years of documents that the ANC's been putting out. This shouldn't surprise you. They've been busy with something called the National Democratic Revolution.
I know about that.
From their inception. I know that that's what they had in mind, which is why I've never voted for them.
Right. Muzi, is there something
at least they've had the courage of their convictions and have carried on doing what they said they would do, you know?
Yeah. Muzi?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can, yeah.
Yes, we can.
Okay. Hallelujah. For what I wanted to say was, for any of the haters who might be watching this, I'm not here to beg for anything from Scott or Gareth. I'm here with a serious concern, and Gareth Cliff is one of the most logical people in the country, something a lot of people in the country seem to be lacking these days. And Gareth, I was watching, and you said that the education does not make people ready for employment. You know, I see a great lack of critical thinking amongst our youth. In fact, it's much more fun and more entertaining to be a non-thinker, to be a criminal, because we have criminals in government. We don't have leaders who inspire the young to think, you know. And so I am here because I'd like to, you know, talk about what can we do to change things for the better. And of course, the only thing we can do is talk to the people of South Africa. So I did a video today, which I was going to upload tomorrow, as to why the majority of South Africans keep voting for corrupt leaders. And the reason why, from my own observation, is that the majority of people do not assess the type of leader that they see. These leaders clearly lie, and then they don't fulfill their promises. We have a serious problem of people just taking what is being shown and not going further than that. All because majority of South Africans just care about their next meal. And if you care about your next meal, you're easy to entice, you're easy to deceive, and to control. The government does not teach people to think. This is why our education does not teach people to think, because if they were to think, they'd make the right decisions, you know? So, Gareth, what do you think about that?
Yeah,
about
I think, Muzi, I think you're being a little unfair to the young people of South Africa who've been dealt a particularly horrible hand, not only by the government, but we have lots of social problems in South Africa that stem not from government, but from the breakdown of the nuclear family, from apartheid, which had a profound and significant effect that you're not going to wash out in just one generation. And I'm not arguing with you here. I'm backing up your point to say that there are obviously people who aren't thinking critically. There are obviously young people in this country who have been swept up by bad ideas. And yes, there are a large proportion of our population who are happy to take handouts from government and to be thought of as serfs, in a semi-feudal system where the ANC are the lords. But there are also young people in this country who are smart, who are vigorous, who are ready to take on any challenge, who are hardworking. I've met them. I've employed some of them. I work with young people in this country, black and white, who have great attitudes and who want to make this a country for their own families one day, and who want to make lives better for their own parents. And some of these young people have been dealt a very unfair hand. There is an extraordinary problem with HIV, with child-headed households. All of these things that I'm mentioning now are not small things, and they don't make it easier for people. While I admire the attitude that you have professed so far in this discussion, some people are not as fortunate to be able to step into themselves or to figure out early on that they may be a bit different and that they're okay with that. Some people are alone in this world. They don't have parents. They certainly don't have father figures. They haven't got any money. They've got nothing to look forward to tomorrow. And those people do just survive from day to day with hungry stomachs, and they'll take a handout from wherever it comes. And I'm not making excuses for them or arguing with you, but it is something to think about. And we can't be unsympathetic to those people, because while the government has let them down, there are many other things that have made their lives tough too.
Right. Now, I just want to intercede here for a second. Just addressing, we've got about 1,200 people watching at the moment. If you'd like to
is that good, or shall I leave?
No, that's good.
Okay.
If you'd like to put questions to our guests, please throw them into the side chat. Remember, the current bid on the painting is 6,150 Rand. We can do a lot better, guys. I think Nell is the current leader in that auction. But please remember to subscribe to be kept informed on the Loving Life channels. And now, let's get back to one of the comments that just came across the side chat. And this is directed at you, Gareth. And it's from Robert. And he says, Gareth, I've been listening to you for more than half my life. You have some serious roots in the history of South Africa. But it is worrying to me how slightly pro-ANC you are. They are all rotten.
Oh my God. All right. Now, I started this. No, but Scott, this is a problem. And I think it's a kind of cognitive dissonance. I spent the first half hour of our discussion telling you what's wrong and why the ANC are to blame. And Robert is taking only the last couple of minutes where I've tried to show you what's going on from the other side. I've tried to bring in a little balance by experience into the discussion. And I'm certainly not giving the ANC any kudos or compliments. And Robert's interpreting that to mean I'm sounding pro-ANC. That's not my fault, that's Robert's.
I totally accept that. I'm just posing what he said. Muzi, do you want to say something?
Well, I'd just like to say my view on the. Oh, yeah, Scott, I'm a super Christian, leaning towards the Bible heavily. Gareth, I don't know about that, about you and how you see Christianity and so on. But I'm a former Muslim, so my change was extremely significant. Supernatural things also happened. But when you say the lack of fathers also plays a big role in our society, I agree. Most family members grew up without fathers, and the importance of the father you can in the Bible. And I see that it's not just the ANC that has failed the people, but also the pastors in South Africa, in which they all preach money, they preach lies, they don't preach anything true, they don't preach any doctrine. And this is also what messes up the youth, because there are no real leaders. And so, although I somewhat grew up different from them, I also did grow up in the townships. I know what it's like. I do speak a South African language. My only problem is that when I lower myself, I am humble and meek, I am still hated just because I look like I've never suffered. I have offered knowledge to people, but they reject it because they say, what do you know about my suffering? And it's like, I'm not here to talk about your suffering. I'm here to give you life-giving water. So you can
Muzi,
navigate through life.
You understand, people who only know suffering, that's the only story they've got. So if you don't have suffering, they don't know how to relate to you. And religion is an important part of your life and an important part of so many people's lives. I used to go around in my 20s, and I know people still think I'm a bit arrogant, but the fact is, I think I'm reforming slowly. I'm becoming a little more accepting and tolerant. But I used to go around in my 20s, and I was one of those very outspoken atheists who thought that religion was stupid and that people who believed in God were somehow missing the point. And I've come to a realization that's not only not very generous of me, because I haven't had the same experience, but it's also not true in some fundamental way for the people who believe that. If your code, if your principles are derived from the Bible or from the Quran or from the Old Testament, that is for you a guiding set of principles, which I respect, because I think that the majority of them are good for all human beings, and it's made largely Western civilization into the very powerful force that it has been for the last 500 to 1,000 years of human history. And I don't knock it anymore the way that I used to. I was very unkind about people who believe. But the fatherlessness thing is something which is a very uniquely South African problem. And it comes from apartheid, but it also has a cultural component, which people are very uncomfortable talking about. There's a polygamy component to it. There is the idea that mothers have to raise children in some communities and fathers actually don't have any responsibility. But the component of it that was apartheid related had to do with migrant labor. And you guys probably know this, so I don't want to give you a history lecture. But a lot of black men were taken or were asked to go where the money was and to take up jobs where the mines were. And they were left their families behind, and sometimes had another family in Johannesburg or wherever they were working. And this complicated the family dynamic in black families. So it's a real problem, and it's not something to make light of. I think it may be the source of far more of the pain than people are willing to admit. And there are lots and lots of people who are feeling that acutely every day. I don't want to rubbish that or make less of a deal of it than it should be made. And I really feel that religion is, for some people, a great source of succor and comfort. And in your case, that certainly sounds to be what it does for you, and that's great. And I support it wholeheartedly. I agree with you, by the way, about the pastors who are interested in money and putting on a show rather than helping the people in their congregation. But just like the politicians in South Africa, the pastors have seen a very gullible crowd, and they're playing to that, and they're making sure that their own nest is feathered first. The crowd, we need to, as people, you get the government you deserve, right?
Okay.
So we need to wake up and get a better government. And it might take another generation, I don't know. I'm certainly trying. I mean, you're trying, I'm trying, right?
All right. Can I ask then, like, what written standard should we all follow as people of this country that's going to have some foundation for us to agree with? Because if it's not the Bible, if it's not that, what can it be, Gareth? It'd be nice to hear your opinion.
Well,
we all have to agree on something.
The best, no, I don't think we all do. And it's absolutely fine to not agree on everything or on even one thing. I don't have any problem with people I disagree with. I like them. They make me excited to be alive. They give me a reason to have discussions and debates. I have a feeling that you and I, if we spoke long enough, would find lots of things to disagree with each other about, and I'd welcome that. The best bet we have is our equivalent to the American Declaration of Independence and Constitution, our own Constitution, something which doesn't tell you what to believe, and it doesn't tell you what the nation is, but it does tell you what rules apply to all of us, what we should consider to be every man's right. And I think it's a good starting point, because Muslim, Christian, Buddhist, Jew, we're going to have disagreements about what exactly all of that means. But the Constitution is a legal document, and it is primary in South Africa post-1994, and I don't think it's a bad document. No lawyer in the world has come out and said, well, South Africa's Constitution's rubbish. The only people who seem to have a problem with the Constitution in South Africa at the moment are politicians who want to change it, and we should be very, very wary of them. But the people of South Africa, by and large, embraced the Constitution. I still have a copy of it somewhere on one of these shelves, and I'm proud of it. I studied law at university, and that Constitution was an important foundation for everything that followed, political, social, economic. And it says that you and I are entitled to being treated the same by the law. And that is a very good starting point. So even if we don't agree on all the details, that we can do that is a great place to start. That you are as valuable as I am, and so is Scott, and so is everyone else.
Well, I have to tell you, Gareth, there are a couple of interesting points that come out of what you just said. The first is the issue of changing the Constitution for expropriation without compensation, which I think is just shooting yourself in the foot classically during these economic times. And the other one is some really good news that came out, and that is that food parcels can now be delivered by NPOs, not have to be sent to a central distribution point. That actually came out today. And that was, again, based on the Constitution.
South Africa has a huge number of charity organizations that do God's work, and they're saving people's lives while we're sitting here talking. And that they were prevented from doing their work is despicable. And I think that government have, even if they had to be forced to do it by the courts or by threats that people would disobey, it's good that this is now happening. There are lots of people in need in this country, and we all should be rallying to help them in whichever way possible. No one should be prevented from doing charity. And as to your first point, yes, expropriation without compensation is a terrible idea. It's a terrible idea because property rights are, and I'm sure Muzi will agree with me because he's already said that he's a fan of the Bible. I mean, in the Bible, certain things belong to certain people, and thou shalt not steal. It's bad enough, in my opinion, as a person who's more or less a libertarian, it's bad enough that we have to hand over half of our earnings, or just less than half at this stage, it might be more in a while, to the government to do with as they please, and they're not doing good things with it. So you don't even get a say as to what they do with half of your money. So you're working for 6 months, maybe 5 months of the year for government, and then they take that away from you at the barrel of a gun. And really, that's the whole point with all law, right? If you create a law, you must be willing, ultimately, to exact violence on people if they don't follow the law. Otherwise, don't make the law. And, tax is essentially theft, where the government have a monopoly on violence. But I don't want to get into a philosophical discussion about tax. I think expropriating someone's property without compensating them is just, there's a word for that already. It's called theft. We don't need to call it expropriation without compensation. We all know what stealing is. We know because our parents, hopefully, or our teachers, or people that we respected when we were growing up told us, you don't take what isn't yours.
Right. Now, you just touched on violence there. A lot of people say to me in emails, they say, I wish we had the death penalty back, because that would stop so many of the random murders. What are your views on that?
Well, we had a landmark case called State versus Makwanyane shortly after the Constitution was adopted. And in that case, the Constitutional Court of South Africa decided that the death penalty ran contrary to the rights of people, even convicted and sentenced people, to dignity and to the basic conditions of any human being that lives in a free society. And that is not unusual in first world democracies. It's not unusual in civilized countries. I am afraid of giving the government any more power than they already have. And to give them the ability to execute someone who's inconvenient to them seems to me to be a very bad idea. As much as we all hate criminals, there are countries in the world that have put people to death for much less than committing crimes, for having ideas like Muzi and I have. I would be very, very worried if we gave this government, or any other in the world, frankly, because governments have a horrible track record, the power to just kill you because you'd done something wrong, even if it was something very wrong. I don't like the death penalty. I don't like it in the Bible, as it turns out. I don't like it in the laws of a country, and I think that countries that put people to death are usually quite barbarous countries as well.
Your views, Muzi?
Yeah, I agree with Gareth. And, execution in the Bible, in the Old Testament, was a different dispensation. And now we are in the dispensation of grace. And so no one has the right to execute any other right now because we've all sinned, right? So indeed, as Gareth puts it, like me or him would be executed just because we say what the government doesn't want to hear. So indeed, that would not benefit the country at all. I think a lot of people would just lose their lives for thinking differently. That's my opinion.
Right. Now, I'm going to start posing questions we've received in the side chat to you guys, mainly to Gareth. And I think we've got a bit of 7,000 Rand now on the painting, and of course all that money goes to Farmers Aid Charity, which is fantastic. Now,
Great.
Okay, Golden Sheep has asked, Scott, please ask Gareth about the looming civil war you have been intimating is going to happen here. What are your views on the possibility of a civil war in South Africa, Gareth?
Look, I mean, there's conspiracy theory piled upon conspiracy theory going on. This seems to be an ongoing discussion among people who are frightened, and I understand it because, when we're in a situation like lockdown, you jump to the worst possible conclusion. You think in your head, how bad could things be? I have seen absolutely no evidence of a coordinated plan to bring this country to civil war. It is against absolutely everyone's interests. There is not a single party in this country, political, social, economic, that would want things to brew into some sort of dystopian civil war. Am I missing something? Because if that is the case, that it isn't in anyone's interests, then as people in the 21st century who have the ability and the technology to be able to communicate effectively with each other and do things that make a positive difference, I think that we need to take the high road on this. So if we ever get to that point, let's stop ourselves just short. I mean, what do you think? Do you honestly believe that there's a civil war coming, Scott?
No, but I do think there is regional anarchy. And if that gets out of control, then that could lead to something bigger.
Well, there was regional anarchy with the hippies in San Francisco in the 1960s. Nobody was talking about civil war. I mean, civil war that means that the country is rent in two. And I don't know who those two sides are going to be. The average South African, black or white, wants their family to be safe, wants to have an opportunity to make some money and to live as well as possible, wants their kids to be educated. We have that in common in South Africa, far more than we have any divisions, which are magnified by race baiters on both sides of an argument.
Right. Now,
I'm not as worried. I mean, I'm not nearly as negative and pessimistic as that golden sheep who asked that question.
Yeah. Well, what do you think about the situation in certain parts of South Africa? And it seems to be the Cape where it seems to be happening a lot now, where shops are being openly looted and the police are just standing by. Isn't that basically anarchy in that region?
It happened in Los Angeles when O.J. Simpson was found not guilty.
Yeah,
Did
but
I say that was anarchy?
I think the difference is that in South Africa, there's quite clearly a growing number of people who are starving. And when people are starving, they'll do desperate things. And just today in Pretoria, 11,000 people queuing for food parcels. I actually showed the video footage at the start of this live stream. Now, if those 11,000 people get to the stage where their kids are dying of starvation, don't you think they're going to just go and find food wherever they can?
Yes, but you're not talking about people who have malicious intent. You're talking about hungry
people.
No,
I never suggested malicious intent.
We're not talking about people who pick up pitchforks and go and start a civil war. What they're going to do is try and find food for their kids. It's a very different motivation.
That's what I'm talking about. But that is a level of anarchy because the government has lost control.
Well, as much as any government has control, you could be in the state of Michigan in America, where they're currently fighting with their governor, who's a bit of a fascist by the looks of things, Governor Whitmer. And the people of Michigan are pitching up outside the state capitol armed to the teeth to make a statement because they think that she should end the lockdown. Now, I don't see why we should treat what's going on at the State House in Michigan any differently to the way that we treat people in this country who are probably a little more desperate, but are no less passionate about their cause. This is what free humans are free to voice their opinions and to argue with government. What they're not free to do is steal. But if you're desperate and you don't have an option, and the government has forced you to that point, then I suppose that's what you're going to have to do. And remember, there are also liquor stores raided. So it's a question of like stupid rules that were applied that didn't need to be applied, and that are now putting those businesses in danger. And again, we've seen how our government feels about property rights. So I'm not going to defend or attack them on that front. The evidence is obvious to all. I don't think it's anarchy, though. What it is desperation. There's a difference.
What are your views,
Scott,
Mizzy?
can I add something?
Yeah, please go ahead.
Yes.
Yeah, go ahead.
I wanted to
Scott, sorry, just before you carry on, Muzzy, I've got another 15 minutes or so, and then I'm afraid I'm going to have to go.
Okay, right. Well, after this, we'll pose the questions I've got to you, Gareth. Yeah, carry on, Muzzy.
Okay. Yeah, I agree with Gareth. And for me, I personally think the government has not really lost control. They're the ones initiating this lockdown, and there's 11,000 people queuing because most likely those 11,000 people were those who were hustling every single day of their lives. And with the lockdown, you can't go to certain areas. This is the government's doing. And I also believe that this lockdown needs to end. It's destroying everybody's plans. It has destroyed everybody's way of making money. So I think the government has some control. And I again agree with Gareth, like there are no two opposing sides. It is solely just based on desperation for the time being. But can I quickly ask Gareth something?
Yeah, go ahead.
One question. Okay, Gareth, who do you believe is our real enemy right now? Do you think it's the government, or is it the socialists, communists, like that lunatic you were debating with last week? That guy who said you want to sacrifice lives for your business? Who do you think is the real enemy? The ANC or these lunatics?
Muzi, I don't go to sleep at night with ideas of enemies. I really don't. I think that, we live in an interesting time where people like you and I, who are reasonably young, have so many opportunities and so many technological capabilities that none of the generations before ours ever had. We also didn't have to go to war and fight for our country or for our politicians or for our king like so many people before. Mine is the first generation in my family that hasn't had to wear a uniform and go and fight for something we didn't necessarily care about. My dad had to, both my grandparents did, all my great-grandparents, and so on. We have all the information in the world at our fingertips. And of course, data is expensive in South Africa, but it's amazing how even poor people prioritize that. I don't think it's as bad as people like to imagine it is. Even in the lockdown, there are so many things that make the lockdown in South Africa in 2020 better than life for our great-great-grandparents in any part of the world, no matter how rich they were or how connected. We have running water and electricity some of the time, and I think that we tend to jump to the conclusion that things are really bad and they're going to get a whole lot worse. That's an attitude, and it's not an attitude I share. Don't go to sleep at night thinking, if we could just remove that person or that ideology, the world would be better. What we have to do is confront bad ideas with better ones, both political and social. And if we can do that through conversations like this, where perhaps someone in Scott's audience has a really great idea, and they communicate that idea to you or to me or to Scott or to someone else, and we start spreading those good ideas and we start doing things that help each other. It doesn't matter who is, all the armies of hell can be allied against you in a situation like that, and you can still win. I don't know who the enemy is, because it's not as if I see everybody in binary terms. I know Julius Malema. I know John Steenhuisen. I've met these people. I've met Cyril Ramaphosa. Nobody's 100% good and nobody's 100% bad. We tend to think of ourselves as being good, but you have aspects of your personality that are bad. So does Julius. So does Cyril. So does John Steenhuisen. And I'm sure that if you spent enough time with them, you would find some things to like and some things to intensely dislike. But enemies, I don't know that I have a single enemy in the world that I would want to see horrible things happen to. And I'm not speaking as some kind of woo-woo spiritual guy. It's just not the way I think.
Oh, okay. Can I just quickly add something to that? You said people should share better ideas, counter bad ideas with good ideas. And so what I see the lunatics are doing is that they believe their insane ideas is the best idea. And so they share it constantly on repetition. And I believe that we should be doing the same thing, that if we think we have a good idea, my personal good idea is repentance and the Bible, well, you want to share that continuously. But I don't see many normal people, I guess, sharing good ideas at the same level as these lunatics are sharing their ideas that they believe is good. Should we not be fighting as they are?
Well, I think there are lots of people speaking out. I know plenty of people who are now, thanks to technology, starting their own shows like Scott has, like so many people whose careers we've launched at cliffcentral.com. There are people who I disagree with ideologically who are making their voices heard, and that's good. The worst thing we can do is stop someone else from saying something because we think it might be offensive. I'd rather know what you think and then decide for myself than have someone censor you. And I think we're entering a world now where, thanks to, even though it's messy, social media, podcasting, all of the things that I'm very involved in on a daily basis, we have a plethora of attitudes, opinions, and ideas to deal with. And may the best man win.
Right. Okay. Now, I've got a number of questions here, and I know we're running out of time, so I'm just going to pose this question to Gareth. And it's from Mr. S. He says, Gareth, what do you think about this logic release of 36,000 convicted criminals into society. I thought it was 19,000, but anyway, due to COVID. And then the Department of Education is sending thousands of kids back into confined buildings next week.
Well, there's increasingly evidence to show that children are hardly at all vulnerable to this disease. So we have seen not one, to my knowledge, and I'm happy to be corrected on this, and I'm not an epidemiologist, but we have not seen one case of a child-to-adult transmission of COVID, or any cases where a child has died only from COVID. There have been children who have died, rare occasions all over the world where children have died, but usually because they've already had some pre-existing condition. So children are not particularly at risk. I hope that answers the second part of your question. As for prisoners being released, who knows what irrational, bizarre nightmare wakes some of our politicians up in the middle of the night and makes them think that letting prisoners go. Some of these prisoners may be in for stupid crimes like, selling drugs. It's not as dangerous as murdering or raping. And they may have been in a waiting trial prison for up to 12 years. I've been into that Kgosi Mampuru prison in Pretoria. We did a show from there once, and it is the most awful place you can imagine. And being there waiting for your trial, which means you're not even necessarily convicted, I think they can round up the ones who make themselves evident afterwards. If they think this disease is as dangerous as they clearly think it is in respect of starting a lockdown, then maybe they believe they're saving lives. I don't know that those criminals are going out necessarily and doing criminal things, but I also don't know that they're good people. I'm in no position to address that. If I were in government, I wouldn't release the prisoners, but it's not my government, and I'm not in charge.
Right. Now, I know that we're running out of time, Gareth, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to wrap up our discussion with you, and I'll carry on with Muzi for a little bit longer. What I'd like to say, Gareth, is thank you so much for joining us tonight. You obviously have a huge following out there in South Africa. We had up to, I think, 1,500 people watching at one time. So that's an excellent outcome. I appreciate your frankness and your input. I hope the people who've watched have learnt from what you're saying. I think what you're saying makes a lot of sense. You hit the nail on the head. Is there something?
Some of it. Give yourself an out. You might want to change your mind later.
Is there a message you'd like to give to people who are watching the live stream now, or who might watch the video later? Just some message to people in South Africa.
Yeah, I hope we get out of this lockdown quickly. This is a country again that's positioned in a unique way in the world because we're the gateway to a continent of mostly young people who are an unsaturated consumer market. They're hungry for their own independence. The young people of Africa are keen to make their contribution in the world. They already are in many ways, shapes, and forms. And I think that Africa is the one last place for people who want to explore those unsaturated markets, whether it's through products or services. It's also a place where we're very innovative, and we're innovative because we have to be. We don't necessarily have the infrastructure that the rest of the world has. We're a little bit behind in terms of the development of our countries, but that doesn't always represent the worst in us. I think sometimes it leaves gaps for us to develop great new things. And there are countless opportunities if you're just prepared to work. I'm very happy, for what it's worth, that I was born in this country. I'm very proud of the contribution of my ancestors to it. I hope to make a measurable contribution in some way, shape, or form. But I have found more reasons to smile on a daily basis, even in arduous times like this, about being South African than I have found to frown. And while I never, ever will hold it against anyone to change their nationality or to consider themselves a global citizen, for whatever it's worth, I'm here at this time and I'm going to make my bloody contribution. Whether the political parties or the mainstream media or the people who like me like it or not. I'm here to stay, and I'm here to make a difference, and I'll bloody well go down fighting.
Fantastic. All right, thanks, Gareth, and I hope we can get you back sometime, perhaps after the lockdown, and have a follow-up or an update.
Very good. Well, thank you, and Muzi, very nice to meet you. Scott, I appreciate the interview. Thank you.
Thanks,
Okay,
Gareth.
take care. Bye for now.
Great, thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Okay, Muzi, it's just you and I now. Now, I'm just going to put this
Yeah.
painting up for a second, because we now have a bid of 10,000 Rand on the painting, which is fantastic. All the proceeds go to Farmers Aid. I apologize about all those other questions that were asked, guys, but we ran out of time with Gareth, and we did have 90 minutes with him, so that's great. Chris, if you could please just send me an email. Marlena, if you could just put my email address down in the side chat so that Chris can send me an email to confirm that bid of 10,000 Rand. Now, I'm going to pose a question that I got here to you, Muzi. Okay, where was that question I saw? Okay. Okay, now, Dan Berryman asked, I've heard that the death penalty can still be exercised under our constitution, but only for treason against the state. Have you heard about that, Muzi?
No, I have not heard about it. And the state itself commits treason from time to time. Are the people who run it going to be executed as well?
Well, one would hope so, but I doubt it.
Mhm. Exactly.
And another question here is, why have we seen no news coming out of the townships for the last 3 or 4 weeks? Is there bad things happening out there that has been held back from the public?
In all honesty, I don't think so. I think people are rather cooperating in the townships. The last time I was there was in March, before the lockdown. And thus far, my only information or source of what's happening there is my wife's family. And she traveled to the townships in our area 3 weeks ago, and everybody was cooperating. I think they might not be showing things because they're trying to, let's say, they can't make a story out of it, because people are actually cooperating to some extent. It's not as bad as people think.
Right. Okay, and you personally, you're holding up. You're okay. You and your family, your new wife. You just got married, haven't you?
Yeah. We're okay. So just waiting for this whole lockdown to end so I can continue with my job training that I was supposed to attend, and then this lockdown happened and canceled all of that.
Right. Okay, I just want to address the side chat and everybody watching. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. We had a really good group of people, and I think you would agree that Gareth is always an entertaining guest, and I really enjoyed the live stream that we shared. And I want to thank Muzi for joining us tonight. Now, I'm just waiting for a confirmation email from Chris for the painting, and then I'm going to wind up this live stream. Just a little bit of homework here to do. All right, now Muzi.
Question?
Yeah, carry on, Muzi.
Yes. Well, I wanted to pose a question to the audience on how they feel about libertarians, because I didn't know Gareth was a libertarian, and to be a libertarian is to solely care about what you do as long as it doesn't affect others, or anybody can do what they want as long as it doesn't affect you. And so I personally think that mindset kind of holds us back from truly loving our neighbor, because you'd want the best for your neighbor, right? So what does the audience think about solely being a libertarian versus being someone who loves their neighbor? Say, hey, neighbor, I love you enough to tell you that this is the truth and this is going to benefit your life if you you live by a written standard, because we're going to make mistakes if we constantly make up new ideas. There is a written standard written for us, me saying being it the Bible. So if you love your neighbor enough, you'll be like, hey, here's a written standard that benefits the whole family. So I'd like to ask the audience, what do you think about being a libertarian? Is it a good idea to be solely that or not?
Right. Okay. Now, I'm still waiting for Chris's email. Chris, homestays@gmail.com. If you can just run that past. Look, I just, while we're waiting, I just want to thank the moderators once again for the fantastic job you guys do. I want to thank all of those of you who participated in the side chat. I do apologize that I do apologize that we couldn't get to all your questions, but you heard what Gareth had to say. He had another commitment to get to. As soon as I have received Chris's email, we're going to wrap this up, because we do need to get an email confirmation on that bid, because we have had situations where people have put a bid and just disappeared in the past. So I'm just waiting on that. Otherwise, what we'll do is we'll go to the bid prior to that and ask them to send an email to us. So Chris, you've got to get that email to me. Are there any questions anyone would like to ask Muzi while we're just waiting for that email to come through?
Also, Scott, did you speak to Big Daddy?
Yes, I actually sent Big Daddy an email that night, and with your email address. So we'll see what comes of that. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
All right.
Because one of his fans backed me.
Yeah. Can Chris confirm if he's just sent me the email or not? All right. Now, Felix says, Muzi, I agree with you. I only tried the best to follow Jesus Christ, our only Savior. Our main job on earth is to win souls for eternal life with our Father in the kingdom. You must find that quite frustrating in the townships, Muzi, doing that.
Yes, and I was trying to, expand on that with Gareth, that, you try to give people life-giving water, and it's not, I shouldn't have to be one with you in terms of suffering to give you something better, because at the end of the day, they don't know if I suffered or not. I'm just here to tell you, hey, here's the good news. Just follow this, repent, and your life will be better. You will have peace in your life. You will not be dictated solely by your belly, solely by your flesh. And it is so frustrating that they reject the truth of the Bible, and they reject common sense too, because apparently it looks like common sense and decency doesn't get you far in life, because our government thrives on indecency and lack of common sense. So it is very, very frustrating, and there might be legitimate excuses that the family, apartheid, and so on, but we can't sing that song forever. We have to take responsibility at the end of the day. We just have to, or else we're always just going to be where we are.
Right.
And that's not a bad thing to say, or shouldn't have to be.
All right, guys. So look, I'm going to wrap up the live stream now. Thank you all for joining us, and I have thanked the moderators. Thanks, guys. Thanks, Muzi, for joining us here tonight as a surprise guest. It's always nice to get your input. And with that, sorry, Muzi, you would like to say something?
Oh no, I was saying thank you for having me, Scott.
Oh, you're very welcome. All right, guys, with that, I'm going to wrap up tonight's live stream.